Well. Good afternoon, fellow Texans. I am Daniel Miller, president of the Texas Nationalist Movement, and I'm so excited to be able to join you today to make what is perhaps one of the there's no getting around it. It is literally the biggest announcement that we have ever made as the TNM. But before we get to the announcement, I want to give you a little background to explain how we got here and why what we're announcing today is so important. You see, in 2005, the Texas Nationalist Movement was founded. And our mission, our singular purpose, was to secure and protect the political, cultural, and economic independence of Texas. It's no small task. You know, in 2005, the issue of Texas independence wasn't on the radar for most people. It was not talked about in political circles, but it was something that we knew at that time was the right thing. And we knew that thousands, if not millions of Texans harbored that sentiment. And of course, a key component of that foundation of the Texas Nationalist Movement was an independence referendum, an opportunity to give Texans a voice on their political destiny. Now, granted, the organization engaged in many other fights during that time across all three of those aspects of independence: political, cultural, and economic. We engaged in fights over the Alamo and our historical monuments. We engaged in legislative action that helped bring about the Texas Gold Depository Bill. But we never forget that back in 2005, the issue of independence was only polling in single digits. But it was amazing to us as we crisscrossed the state and engaged with Texans, how the idea of being able to vote on independence captured the imaginations and lit fires of passion in the hearts of Texans. Regardless of their political affiliation or socioeconomic groups or ethnic backgrounds, we knew that the very concept of self-government resonated with every single solitary Texan. So let me explain why we believe that is and how we got here today. You see, the Texas Constitution, as it currently stands, written after the Civil War, starts with these important words: that Texas is a free and independent state. But what many people fail to realize is that the very end of Article 1, Section 1, the very first words in our Texas Constitution, end with these words: that the perpetuity of the Union depends on the right of local self-government, unimpaired to all the states. So you see, it specifically says that Texas will remain in this union as long as our right of local self-government remains unimpaired. But think about the gravity of those words for a moment. You know, at the moment that the federal government imposed the first policy on the people of Texas that we did not want, or the first time that a law that the people of Texas passed was overturned by an unaccountable federal judiciary, Texas had the absolute right to reassert its status as an independent, self-governing nation. But, you know, we didn't. Instead, we patiently bore the burden of trying to reform our relationship with the federal government and bring our 49 other member states along with us. We tried for decades to reform the federal government, to cut spending, to eliminate debt, to stem the tide of the encroachment on our personal liberties and our rights, to end corruption at the federal level, to do all of these things. We fought the good fight. Much like Texas reached out and tried to reform its relationship with Mexico, and much like the 13 colonies implored the King of England to respect their rights and the right of self-government. But yet, much like their entreaties, our pleas have fallen on deaf ears. You see, the Texas Nationalist Movement since 2005 has believed that the relationship between Texas and the federal government has been and become untenable, unsustainable, and unfixable. You see, Texans are sick and tired of living under 180,000 pages of federal laws, rules, and regulations, administered by 440 separate agencies and 2.5 million unelected bureaucrats. We are tired of suffocating under a stack of federal laws that, if it were printed out and stacked, it would reach higher than the San Jacinto Monument. You see, Texans should be governed by Texans and Texans alone. We should never be in a position to have our political destinies determined by California, New York, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Massachusetts, or any other exterior body. Texas should be governed by Texans. We shouldn't have our livelihoods and fortunes determined by a politicized and unaccountable federal judiciary whose only motivation is to empower the federal system and deprive the states and the people of our rights. You see, this has led to some real consequences for us. Because of this imbalance, because of Texas' success, Texans currently overpay anywhere from $103 to $160 billion into the federal system, money that we never see again. That is unacceptable. The negative economic impact is the equivalent of a Hurricane Harvey event hitting Texas every 9 months. So you see, that's not the only part. It's not that they're stealing money from our pockets overtly. They do it covertly as well, just through bureaucracy. You see, the growth of federal regulations over the last 6 decades has cut economic growth by about 2 percentage points a year. So what that means is, although the average median income is somewhere north of $50,000, in the absence of those federal regulations, the average median household income would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $330,000. So just because of their ineptitude and their excessive regulations, they are stealing somewhere in the neighborhood of about $270,000 from you, from your family, from your neighbors, and they never bat an eye. You see, and the problem with this is this growth of the federal superstate is crushing the people of Texas. You see, it not only is Texas disproportionately affected by these regulations, but it also disproportionately affects the poorest among us. The rural poor, the urban poor, it doesn't matter. By destroying the incentive to start businesses and increasing the prices on goods and services, they are driving the working poor directly into poverty. And that is unacceptable. You see, and now as we continue to look at what is coming down the pike from the federal government, we can only expect more destruction from the federal superstate. I mean, look for a moment at the disaster that is how the federal government has treated our veterans. Or look at the mess that they've made of the immigration and border system, both creating unparalleled public safety and public health crises. You know, we see political promises coming down the pike that are direct attacks on the core industries that make Texas the 10th largest economy in the world. Agriculture, energy. So it's not just relegated to small and medium-sized businesses. Now the plan is to attack core economic sectors of the Texas economy. And that is unacceptable. Just over the past year, we have seen lawlessness, riots in the streets, not just in Texas, but in other places. And do we hear from the political establishment in Washington, D.C., condemnation of lawless acts? Absolutely not. What we see is the politicization of these acts and outright encouragement. And what we have seen more than anything else is we have seen the doctrine espoused by Karl Marx and Joseph Stalin, long cast off from failed communist states, take root in the hearts and policy promises of millions of those who would claim to be our countrymen. But it's not just these. There are many other reasons. But these are some of the reasons that the people of Texas have indicated in ever increasing numbers that they no longer want to be governed by unelected federal bureaucrats or inept politicians whose only concern for the real challenges faced by Texans is limited to raiding our paychecks for tax money or campaign cash. And you know, for years, as we have seen since the inception of the TNM, the people of Texas have been speaking on this issue. It's just that the establishment hasn't been listening. And in some cases, they have directly acted to prevent the people of Texas from having a definitive voice on Texas independence. You see, since 2009, the issue of Texas independence has been regularly polled by third-party polling companies. And over the last 11 years, we have seen support for an independent Texas increase from single digits to now what we believe is a majority of Texans. In 2009, a Research 2000 poll was conducted that showed a near majority of Republican voters and a near majority of independent voters believe that Texas would be better off as an independent nation. In 2014, around the time of the Scottish referendum on independence, a Reuters Ipsos poll showed that had grown to a majority of Texas Republicans, a near majority of independent voters, and even 1/3 of Democrats who said that Texas should become an independent nation. Then in 2018, a Zogby poll was released that showed that 39% of people across all 50 states believe that any state had an absolute right to leave the Union. And while those numbers obviously trended much higher in Texas, the fact of the matter is that the people overall support the right of a state like Texas to exercise its political will and reassert its status as an independent nation. This culminated in 2020 when the Republican Party of Texas added a plank to its platform with 93% calling for this very thing. So here's what it boils down to. And this has been the message of the Texas Nationalist Movement since day one. At a minimum, regardless of whether you support independence or do not, at a minimum, the people of Texas deserve to have an open, free, fair, public debate on the issue that culminates in a binding referendum on the issue. Much like we saw in Scotland in 2014 and the UK a few short years later in the Brexit referendum, Texans deserve to have their voice heard on their political destiny. So as I mentioned earlier, Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution is absolutely crystal clear on our path forward. Texans must be given an opportunity to vote on Texas becoming an independent nation. So it's for this reason and many others that since 2005, the Texas Nationalist Movement has championed a piece of legislation that would do that very thing. You see, we have been the voice of the people of Texas who believe that Texas would be better off as an independent nation and that we should have that opportunity to become an independent nation among nations. So now we get down to why we're all here today. It seems, my friends, that our time has come. As of today, Texans are one step closer to having our voices heard on the issue of Texas independence. We received word this morning that State Representative Kyle Biederman from Fredericksburg has submitted the Texas Independence Referendum Act to be filed in the next session of the Texas legislature. Long an impediment to giving the people a voice, the Texas legislature now hosts a champion for your right to be heard on the issue of independence. So upon its passage in the next legislative session, the Texas Independence Referendum Act will give Texans a vote on becoming an independent, self-governing nation. And should this legislation pass as is, you, the people of Texas, will have an opportunity to go to the polls in November of 2021 and cast your vote and answer the question, should the state of Texas reassert its status as an independent nation? You're going to get your say, folks. It's time. Importantly, this legislation codifies something that we have preached from the mountaintops since our foundation, and that is the words that are enshrined in Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution, when it says that all political power is inherent in the people and all free governments are instituted on their authority and for their benefit. And the people have at all times the inalienable right to alter, reform, or abolish their form of government in such manner as they may think expedient. So the people of Texas are going to be asked the question about whether they want to join 195 other self-governing, independent nation states. But I think it's fitting that it's State Representative Kyle Biederman that filed this legislation, because his entire career in the Texas legislature has been marked as being a champion of the people. As the first legislator to publicly stand up against the establishment for the people of Texas that had legitimate concerns about the Reimagine the Alamo project, Representative Biederman has proven time and time again that not only does he listen to the voice of the people, but that he will champion what is important to them. So it is absolutely fitting that Representative Biederman takes this heroic step. And make no mistake about it, it took great courage, as the Texas Nationalist Movement had worked with legislators over the many years. Many confessed to us their support for our work, but few would step forward and file the legislation to give you the voice that we fought so hard for. So it took a tremendous amount of courage. And so as Kyle takes the lead on this issue in the Texas legislature, the Texas Nationalist Movement is going to do everything in its power to rally pro-independence Texans from Dalhart to Del Rio and El Paso to Orange and all points in between in support of the fight that lies ahead for him in the legislature. Now, there will be a tendency for everyone to want to engage in the actual independence debate. And that time will come, but that time is not now. With the filing of this legislation, there are only two things in question, two sides of this debate. One side is the people that would want Texans to have a vote in their future. And the other side of this issue are those who believe that the people of Texas should be ruled and governed by a political establishment who believe that they know what is best for us and that we should not be able to vote on this. You see, this issue is going to cut across every party and partisan line that has existed up until this point. There are only two sides of this issue and only one question up for debate right now. Those are the two sides, and the question is this: legislators will elected officials support the right of the people to simply cast a vote, to simply be heard? There is no middle ground from this day forward on that issue. Elected officials that are getting ready to take their seats in the Texas legislature, those that sit now in the governor's mansion or in the lieutenant governor's chair in the Senate, no matter who they are, they can pick one side or the other. One side is a political establishment that believes that Texans are too daft to govern themselves, that we are too simple, that we are too stupid to be able to even have a discussion and a vote on this issue. And then the other is the side of the people who believe in Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution. There are no in-betweens from this day forward. So let's get down to brass tacks. Many of you are going to want to know what you can do right now. And it's absolutely important that you take action. You see, because just like there are not two sides, there's no middle ground, there are only two sides of this issue for electeds. That is exactly where we're at right now. There is no role of spectator in this issue moving forward. If you want to see this legislation not only filed, but passed in the Texas legislature and moved on to a vote so that you can vote on the issue, then here's what I need you to do. First, you need to show Representative Biederman all the support that you possibly can. I can imagine right now, just a few short minutes into this announcement, that he is already receiving backlash from the people out there that are the political equivalent of flat earthers who say that it can't be done. So he needs our support to stand with him in whatever form that takes. But he will need you in the days, the weeks, and the months to come. He deserves more than your praise. He deserves every ounce of support that you can give him in this fight. So let's talk about concrete actions that you need to take right now. We cannot and must not allow Representative Biederman to fight alone. Instead, what you need to do right now is pick up your telephone or go visit your state representative and state senator and tell them that you expect their support for Representative Biederman's bill. You expect their support. We have all the information on our website, so you can talk about the legislation. You can download a copy of it and be able to articulate the positions accurately and with the customary passion that I know that you argue this issue with. But they need to hear from you. Tell them you do not expect them to allow Kyle to be alone on this issue. Now is the time for them to pick a side. And then here's the final thing you can do. You can help us as the Texas Nationalist Movement continue to do what we have done, to do the things that got us to where we are today, to this very moment, to getting this legislation filed, and to help us carry this through the legislative process and beyond. You see, it's not enough to just get the bill filed. We have to get it through the legislature. So we have to get this referendum, but then we have to go on to win the referendum. And all of that work starts right now. So I'm going to encourage you, go to our website at tnm.me, and you can go to specifically the section on our website that deals with the Texit issue, tnm.me/Texit. You can find out everything you need to know about the Texas Independence Referendum Act. You can get your questions answered about Texit, all of the usual questions that people have. It's a benefit of being engaged in this fight for 15 years is, yes, we have thought this through. But more than that, don't just go to our website and read. We encourage you to pledge your support, to join our organization, and to donate for this fight that is ahead. We have a lot of work to do. If we're going to carry this message from Dalhart to Del Rio and El Paso to Orange and all points in between, we need all the support that you can give. We did not come this far just to come this far. We have to get the referendum, and we have to win the referendum. So I'll leave you with this. Many people will try to cast this as some reaction to this most recent election. And while I'm sure that it is factored in the minds of many people, understand that that is not the two sides that are occupying this ground right now. The two sides in question are the two sides that I laid out a moment ago, and the questions that people have to answer when they are considering supporting just this right. We have to ask ourselves, does the Texas Bill of Rights still matter? Are the principles that the men fought and died at the Alamo for still relevant in the 21st century? And are those who publicly champion the right to vote honest about their intentions? Or is it just empty political rhetoric and partisan posturing? I can tell you, for me and for the Texas Nationalist Movement, we're going to use this opportunity to make good on the words of Sam Houston when he said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. My friends, that time is right now. And the question is, will you stand with her?